first reading this morning is so powerful. It comes from the third writer of the book of Isaiah. It speaks to a people who have long known what it is to be terrified and afraid. And what this prophet shares with them and with us on this day is that there is no fear larger than God's vision of hope and grace and love and compassion in this world. So see what this has for your heart on this day. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory shall appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you, and the wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, and those from Sheba shall come, and they shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. God's promises. Today we celebrate, as we've mentioned, the power of Epiphany, and we celebrate on this day the legend of we three kings of Orient are, who bring gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And I'm telling you something that may not be happy for you. They weren't kings. It ain't so. Didn't happen that way. They were Persian or Babylonian magician, sorcerer, magi people who were Gentiles. As Pastor Nancy was teaching the children, they were outsiders who came from a far land in order to worship the Jewish child Jesus. Some things to know before I read the text this morning. Besides that, the other thing to pay attention to, I think, is that this is a long ago and right now story, as Scripture almost always is. It is a story of what can happen when those who are very powerful become contorted by fear. Herod is a king who is sitting on the throne in Jerusalem because he was put there by the power of Rome. Romans were not welcome in the city of Jerusalem. They occupied Jerusalem. They put their guy in power on the throne in Jerusalem. And so the Jewish people in the area were none too happy with Herod the king ruling over them in their holy place. So Herod is living a kind of a stressful experience because he knows he's nobody's favorite. Right? And that can make people a little paranoid. Herod hears that these wise people have come into the midst of the city of Jerusalem, and they have been asking, where is the King of the Jews? Where is the Messiah? Where can we worship this child? Well, to Herod, this would be terrifying kind of question asking, because the most horrifying thing for someone who's holding on to civic power that's been given him by an oppressive force is that people would begin to feel hope that the promises of God might be made real. So people are asking in the streets, where is the Messiah? Is he born? And for the ruler of an occupied territory, these are terrifying questions. So Herod summons those magi, and he tells them that he too is interested in this Messiah. He too wants to know, where is this child to be found? What this scene draws to my mind is, how many of you seen the movie Little Mermaid? You know when the octopus octopus Ursula summons Flotsam and Jetsam and says, "Go find the Little Mermaid," because I want her voice, right? Do you remember the scene? She's terrifying. That's what Herod is doing. He summons the Magi and says, "Go find that baby, because I too want to worship him." The Magi know better. They go and they behold the child and they experience overwhelming joy and they share their gifts and they will not collude with fear and power run amok. They go home by another way. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him, and calling together all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, as it had been written by the prophet, "In Bethlehem of Judea." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay homage." When they heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. And on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and they paid him homage. And then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. May God add a blessing to the reading of this word. Epiphany is all about God being made manifest, God being made real, God being made apprehendable to outsiders and through insiders and outsiders both. These men were Gentiles. They were outsiders. They were not welcomed in Jewish homes. And who was the beholder of the child and the giver of gifts? It was outsiders who paid homage to that child. So on Epiphany, we name the wonder that God is made manifest in all people and through all people, always, forevermore, all people, no exceptions. 16 years ago, I was serving in Duluth, Minnesota. Decades before I arrived on the scene, First United Methodist in Duluth had moved from its downtown location up on top of the hill on Skyline Drive in Duluth. They left the middle of the city, which they had been serving in tangible and touchable ways. They had been people who offered classes and served meals. The church had been a busy place, much like this one, where people used the building as a community resource. They had an opportunity to move to this amazing location on the top of the hill, but they had not figured out, even 20 years later when I arrived on the scene, how to be in service to the community, because they had lost their location where they had been so intimately involved. One of the ways that they continued to be involved in providing ministry was through CHUM, Churches United in Ministry. And CHUM operated, among other things, a food shelf and a homeless shelter for people who needed shelter in the city of Duluth. Duluth in the winter is a formidable place. So a team of people at First United Methodist in Duluth we were trying to consider how it is we could kind of transcend the moat. It felt like we had a moat around this wonderful church. How is it that we could be in community ministry in the community? And we decided that one of the ways we would do it is by serving a hot meal at the drop-in center, which is in the central hillside area. And so we arrived with pots of stew and all kinds of food to be able to share, and we put the pots of stew on the stove so that the veggies could cook, and we settled in and we began conversation, and it became pretty clear after an hour that something was wrong because those veggies were still very crisp. Things were not exactly cooking, and people were getting hungry. So here we were, well-meaning church folk in the midst of this homeless shelter, trying to figure out how we could be not disappointing the people we had come to serve. We were the outsiders there. I'm telling you, it felt palpably real. And so we weren't sure what to do while those vegetables we prayed would hurry up and cook. You know the watch pot story? It's true. And so what I decided to do was take out my guitar. And I started to fiddle around on my guitar because it felt less klutzy than trying to make conversation anymore. And I started playing some chords, and we started singing, I think it's a Leonard Cohen song, Suzanne. One of the best songs ever written. And then we rolled into Both Sides Now. Surely you know that song, don't you? Come on, 60s hippies. Yes, we know those songs. There's something so powerful about singing in community. And as we sang more songs together, people started to gather around. And then we launched into Christmas carols. And more people gathered around, and we joined together in singing these songs, and the presence of holiness and the ways that we could see each other face to face and join our voices together in creating something larger than our fear of each other was palpable. It was epiphany kind of powerful goodness, and as we shared the meal when it finally became ready, we could talk to each other. We could hear what it was to spend Christmas on the streets. We could talk about how frustrating injustice is and how it is that resentment is hard to live with and how forgiveness is hard to find sometimes and how it is heartbreak gets magnified during the holidays. All of those things, both of these communities were able to share in conversation with each other, and we prayed with and for each other, and we left that place knowing that the fragile miracle of beholding the Christ child had happened at the Chum Drop-In Center. As we shuffled down the street, you know Duluth, Chum is like right in the middle of the hillside. As we shuffled down that cold, dark night in Duluth, we knew that we had been a part of dispelling and dispersing, if only for a moment, the power of fear. Our fear of each other, our fear of the otherness, our fear of not being enough. All of those things had been dispelled, and we knew also that fear and power used improperly continue to be a heartache and a wounding of creation in this God's world, because if fear were not used malignantly in this world, we would not have homeless shelters, right? There's enough for everyone in this nation. We would not silo ourselves behind barricades. We would see the Christ child in each person and know that there is no wall, there is no barricade, there is no us and them, there is no othering in the gospel of Jesus Christ. What happened is this: these three people believed in hope enough to follow their hearts, to the place where hope was laying in the body of Jesus Christ, and they bowed down, and they worshiped, and they gave thanks, and we learn from them yet that any power that calls us to compromise the well-being of children is no power that we will follow. There are no outsiders. Epiphany is now. Amen. So as we enter into this time of offering, we don't offer gold and myrrh and frankincense, but we do offer through the gifts that we share a witness to hope. We believe as a movement of Jesus Christ that we are called to take who and what we have and bring it in such a way that the world is changed through our gifting, because we believe Christ lives in all places. So as you share on this day, give thanks, you magi, you bring astounding things to this world.